Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about one of the problems that I have seen with mill grids um, in lots of different brands out there, okay? All these scopes over here have mill grids in them. I actually have even more. But there's a common problem that I'm starting to see with some of these mill grid designs. Um, so over here, I have a sample of a mill grid, right? So you got your vertical stadia line, horizontal stadia line. Uh, these lines are 1 mil apart, right? So I got 1, 2, 3, 4 mils here, and each of these dots, are 1 mil apart from each other. Okay, so at 600 yards, this is what the mill grid would look like relative to a man. Okay, so a man would be about 4 mils tall. Okay, so let me say this: if your scope only goes up to about 10 magnification, this is fine. You don't need more dots in there, okay? Because if you put more dots in there, you can't see them. They start to appear like a straight line, okay? Now, if you've got a scope that goes up to like 15 magnification, all the way up to 25 magnification, it makes sense for there to be more dots in there, okay? So that's the first thing. You have to have enough magnification to justify more than 1 mil dots, okay? So up to 10 1 mil dots are fine, and these serve many purposes. You can range estimate, but you can also spot your splashes and make a correction. So let's say I'm holding on that dot over here, but I see that the bullet splashes on that dot, then I just transition the dot to the target and I make my hit. Okay, but uh, one of the things. So here's the thing. Let's say you've got, because I got like a 25 power scope over here. Okay, this one is from Primary Arms. This is the Athena BPR, and they do it right. What they got. Let me update this now. I'm going to update this in red. So what they have is they have 1/2 mil dots. Okay, and the way that they do their 1/2 mil dots, right? So they would have, so that's a half, that's a half, that's a half, that's a half. So they got a half here, but then they also have a half here, half here, half, 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 half. But the point is that they have these halves not just on the one lines, but also on the half lines, okay? So that each dot, whether in my example here it's a blue or red, each of the dot is a 1/2 mil from each other. And that's fine. That makes a lot of sense on a scope that has, let's say, 15 magnification or more. Okay. Now let me erase this. Okay. Erase these red dots, and I'm going to show you one of the bad examples I have seen, and there's lots of them out there from different companies, right? Okay. Okay. A bad example that I have seen. Okay. Okay. So mind you, the red here is the half, right? So that's a 1/2 mil, 1 mil, mil and a half. So red is a half. Well, what they will do is they will go and they will fill in more dots. Like let's say on this line over here, they'll put a half here, half here, half here, half here, or sometimes they'll put like 0.02s, right? So they'll put like like 3 dots even. They'll put 3 dots here. They'll put all these freaking dots over here, all these dots here, right? Dots, 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 dots. They're putting all these freaking dots here. Dots, 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 dots. Okay, great. So we filled in all the dots, right? So they've got all these dots now at 1 mil intervals, but not on the half lines, okay? And that makes absolutely no sense. So number one, even on a scope that has like 25 magnification, if you put like a 0.02 dot over here, this now starts to look like a straight line to me, okay? I no longer see, like I can't tell the difference between the 1 mil dot and all these other little shits in between, and my eyes start seeing like these, the 3 dots in here, or I can't tell if there's 3 dots in here, or if there's 4 dots in there, or there's 5, because they all look like there's all these dots in there that it appears like almost like a straight line to me. Okay, there's too many dots there. Now, if the scope goes up to, let's say, I don't know, a 50 magnification, then yeah, maybe I can start seeing those dots. But if your scope only goes up to 25 magnification, there's no point in having these like 0.20 dots all over the place over here, right? But on top of that, aside from the fact that there's too many dots over here, what they're doing is on the half lines, they're not putting any dots, okay? So let me put this down for a second. So again, at 600 yards, your man is gonna look like this, okay? So if I get if I have a 25 magnification and I'm trying to be that fine, and let's say I see a splash, let's say on that spot right here where my thumb is, okay, there's no dots there on that 1/2 mil line. I've got nothing to transition, right, where my thumb is right there, if that's where the splash is. I've got nothing to transition from there to the target. So it doesn't make sense to put all these dots over here, but then leave this over here, leave the half lines empty. It's not workable. I mean, I'm out here, I'm looking at, I'm doing this every day, and I'm telling you guys that's not workable. What you're better off with, let's get all these little half shit dots out of here. They're not even half dots. They're like 0.20 mil dots. If they're half dots, would be fine. Let's get all these red dots out of there. Okay. So now, instead of trying, oh, we got some more of these 0.02 dots over here. Okay, so now instead of trying to give us all these 0.20 dots, okay, all we need is a half dot. Yeah, one more, I missed one over here. So let's do this, okay? Let's fill this in. Give us the half dots, right? So between each of these dots, give us just one dot, and that would be the half point, okay? But then on the like 1 mil, like a mil and a half down, also fill in those dots. Okay, those dots would be really helpful. So that now every dot on this grid, okay, is a half mil apart, and I can clearly see the space between the half dots. Okay. So even if I got this guy over here, right? Let's say this guy now lands in between like two of these half dots. Well, that's fine because let's say I was further out, let's say at 800 yards, and he ends up being between the half and the 1, right? Well, that's fine because you can center him in between that, okay? So that would be a lot more useful. Now, that's not to say that you can't have some 0.02 and 0.01 dots for the sake of making fine measurements. And the way that Primary Arms does it is they put like the 0.02 dots up here, like they'll put it 0.02 dots here. Okay, and then they'll give you like these really fine 0.1 dots, like that. Okay, and the reason why that makes sense is because sometimes I can't see the center aiming point, which for Primary Arms is the chevron. And what I'm able to do is I'm able to use these squiggly lines over here to find the center when I can't see the chevron because it's over something of the same color. Like in this case, let's say that chevron would be red on red. So I can use these outer lines here to help me find the center, okay? But that's the thing I want you guys to look out for. I have to because it's like freezing out here. It's like 20 degrees. I had to take my gloves off because I had to write. My fingers are now freezing. I'm working hard for you guys. Okay, so when you guys are looking at the different mill grids and you know the mill grid, because the mill grid is or the reticle rather is what I consider the software, right? The scope itself with the magnification, I consider that the hardware, okay? And the reticle is the software, okay? Because that's what you interact with. And got my gloves on. The reticle and the scope have to be matched up properly, okay? So sometimes I'll see like a a first focal plane scope, okay, but a really shitty reticle that when you zoom out to 1 power, you can't see, you don't have an aiming point. Like the whatever was in the middle has shrunk down to something that's now like almost invisible, okay? And they tell you, well, if you put the illumination on, it looks like a dot. That's not good enough, okay? So if you got, for example, a first focal plane scope, you need these outer posts or big outer circle is something to guide you to the center if you have a first focal plane scope. So that's where I mean that the software has to match the hardware, right? You can't have like this first focal plane hardware, but a shitty reticle so that when you're in 1 power, you don't know where the center is, okay? In many cases, the second focal plane might be better, right? Because second focal plane, the center aiming point, it doesn't change size, right? So when you zoom out to 1x, I mean, yeah, the subtensions don't mean anything, but at least you've got something big that you can aim on. Because remember, the center aiming point is still accurate, okay? The subtensions might not be accurate, but the center aiming point is still accurate in second focal plane, okay? So that's why I say that the hardware and the software have to match up. So when you look at when I look at a scope, right? Any scope, yeah, fine. I want to know what magnification it is, right? Immediately, the next thing I want to look at is the reticle. What does the reticle look like? Especially if it's a first focal plane scope, what does it look like in 1x? Is it of a type that will guide me to the center? Okay, so these are the things you wanna look at. For a lot of people, a second focal plane might be a better choice, especially if you're on a tight budget. Okay. One of the problems with the second focal plane scopes, and I actually got one over here. Yeah, this one's also for primary arms, because I've got some great scopes for primary arms, and I've got some scopes that I thought were once great, but just because of the way I use them, they're no longer so great for me. Okay, so one of the things I have found is that as I'm zooming back, a lot of times, like I have to zoom back to find, like, to get a wider field of view to find my target. And then when I zoom up in practice, a lot of times I come up short. I don't go to, like, say 10 magnification. I end up like at 9 or 8, and that means that, especially if I'm using the bullet drop or the mill lines underneath for holding point, I'm off. Okay. So with the second focal plane scope, you have to make sure that when you're shooting, you're in max magnification. And that's just something that doesn't work for me anymore. Okay, it once worked, it doesn't work for me anymore. So for me, every scope from now on has to be a first focal plane scope. Okay, I'm not saying it has to be for you, but it has to be for me, because I do stuff like this. I do milling. I do all this fancy, not fancy, but I mean, I fully utilize the scope. If all you're using the scope for is magnification and a bullet drop, I mean, you can get that out of a red dot with a magnifier, okay, a lot cheaper, and it will work better in 1x, okay? So if you're using if you're putting 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds on top of the gun, you should be getting a lot more out of it than just magnification and the bullet drop, okay? But anyway, that's the main thing I wanted to tell you guys today is that when you're looking at these mill grids, make sure that I mean, if it's only going up to 10 magnification, yeah, you only need 1 mil dots, right? But if you got something that, because if they give you 1/2 mil dots, you're not gonna be able to see them anyway. They're gonna be too small. But if you got something that's like 15x going up to 25x, you need those 1/2 mil dots, but make sure that the 1/2 mil dots are spaced evenly throughout the grid, right? Including at the half intervals, right? Not to like load you up with like all these little 0.20 mils and 0.1 mils, at the 1 mil intervals, but then leave the 1/2 mils empty. So whatever the finest measurement is in your mill grid, right? Like at any one point, like going across, if it's like, let's say 1/2 mil, then the whole grid has to be in 1/2 mils. If it's like a 0.20 mil, because let's say you have a 50 magnification scope or something, or 40 or whatever, then yeah, then all the dots in that grid, right, at every point have to be like 2 0.2 mils apart. Okay, so a few things for you guys to think about. Let me know what you guys think. Drop some comments below. I'll talk to you all soon.